And I'm just going to go ahead and remove these white lines. It will make the taxis look a little bit more like they're inside of lanes, I think. So I'll select my zoom tool, zoom in so I can see both of those, and then I'm going to use the clone tool. Now, I've already made some settings up here, a feather of 40, I don't really need a transparency at all, and my nib size of around 12. Simply right click your mouse to create an anchor point. That's what that nib is with the plus inside. Now effectively that's the place we're cloning from. Now wherever I click and drag, you'll notice the nib moves as well, the anchor point nib, and effectively it's cloning from that place over the top of that line there. Now if I Control Z undo that one, I might just right click and replace that anchor, slightly different place. Almost the same result, but that looks great. F4, zoom back out. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to mask a couple of these taxis. So I'm going to tap Z on my keyboard for my zoom tool and zoom into this taxi. And then under the mask tools, I'm going to select the magnetic mask tool. On the property bar we have two options, the tolerance and the magnetic area. The tolerance effectively is how far away from the starting color is the tool willing to go. When I click in a moment to start, it will sample that color, and the tolerance indicates how wide a range away from the original starting color it will move to find the edges we're looking for. The magnetic area is how many pixels past where the tool is right now will it go and search for the edge. So I'm going to click right here and release my mouse, and automatically, see how clever it is? When I get to that mirror, I'm going to click and hold my mouse down, and I'm manually, like the freehand tool, going to draw around, release. Now this is a great tool to use when you have a good contrast between the object you want to mask and your background, which is exactly what we have here. Really good contrast between the background and the object. Now if I go too fast away from, don't worry, just bring the tool back, and within 10 pixels it will join up again. And it's such a easy and fast tool to use under the right circumstances. Back to the beginning, double click, and there's our mask. Now what I'm going to do is first of all go over and select the object manager, then I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. Control C on my keyboard and then Control V for Victor, paste back down, and that creates a new object. I'm just going to turn on thumbnail extents mode and increase the size of our thumbnail so that we can see it quite accurately there. Now I don't need the mask anymore, so I can remove the mask. The marching ants you can see there now are the object marquee, and I'll just remove that. So effectively I've got a copy of my taxi sitting on another layer. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that with the other taxi to save some time. Okay, so I've just finished masking the other taxi. I've copied that to the clipboard and I've pasted down as well. So now I have two taxi objects, and I can remove the mask because I no longer need that. So I'm going to name the first taxi right. So taxi right, and the other taxi, taxi left. Now what I'm going to do is select both of these, so finger on shift and select them both, and then right click, and I'm going to group them together. So now I have a group. Now with my background selected, I'm going to come up to Adjust and the Image Adjustment Lab. And here in the Image Adjustment Lab, all I'm going to do is lower the saturation to give sort of removing the color, going toward grayscale, but leaving just a little bit of color in there. And that looks about right. Click OK. And now up to Effects, to Blur, and we're going to go with Motion Blur. Now with Motion Blur, make sure the direction is in the direction that you want the blur. So as you can see, my taxis are going slightly to the right a little. So I'm just going to make sure my arrow there is pointing in the same direction as the blur, and we'll slide this up 13, 14. That looks pretty good. Let's click OK. And can you see, because we had the background selected but not the group of objects, only the background was affected. And doesn't that look cool? Okay, I'm going to open up the group, so I'll click the little arrow, and this is the group of my two taxis. I'm going to select the top taxi, and now I'm going to add a new lens. Now by default it will automatically go above that taxi. So Object, Create, New Lens. I'm going to create a photo filter and click OK. And by default the photo filter is red in color, but the thing I want you to see is over here inside of my group the new lens is sitting above that taxi. Now I'm going to select the color magenta and we'll go with 75% and click OK. The powerful thing about a lens is it creates an entire effect without actually changing or altering the images. So our images remain unchanged, but we have the filter affecting everything. What is it that you can see that's standing out here? Well, what it is that this filter, even though it's above those two taxis and part of this group, is actually affecting everything. As you can see, we can see the color of the magenta over the background as well. Now the reason for this, let me close this up quickly, is if I select the group, up here in merge mode we have a brand new merge mode called pass through, and that's what's happening right now, is that filter is passing through the group and affecting everything outside of those two taxis. If however I were to select normal, can you see only the two taxis are being affected now, and of course if I choose any of these other options only those taxis will be affected. However, in pass-through mode, that magenta filter, it's affecting everything, including the background. And to finish off, we're going to add some text. So I'm going to create a new object, rename that to text, F3 on my keyboard to zoom back out, and I'm going to select the text tool, click, and I've already copied to the clipboard what I want to type, so I'll just paste that back down. And it's very important now that we actually highlight all of that text. Then what I'm going to do is come up to Object, Text, and Character Formatting. Now I wanted to highlight that text so that as we make adjustments here in the Character Formatting Docker, you can see it all happen in real time, and I'll show you what I mean. So if I want to increase the font size, how good is that? And I'll just click and drag that down a little lower, or I can type a value in, for example 120, hit enter. Now if I want to change the type, I can simply, in this case I'm going to tap V on my keyboard to go all the way down to Verdana, which is just there, and I'm going to select bold, and I'm also going to adjust the line spacing. In fact, what I want is the top of the letter I to be outside of the design, and then I want to affect the line spacing so that the K is just halfway through the edge of the image there. And I can also affect the character spacing, so I can close the character spacing up or increase the character spacing, and it's great, it's all in real time as I make the adjustments. Finally, I'm going to click on the color white, deselect, and as you can see we're finished. Let's go back to my pick tool, and that's our final design. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this and learnt a lot about all of the new features in PhotoPaint X6.